Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I'm glad we're getting a good prompt start on our hearings for FAA reauthorization. So we do this properly and thoughtfully as we wind through the beginning of this session. So again, I just bounced from another committee, so I hope I'm not asking these too redundant from what's already been covered today. I've been concerned about pilot training and pilot availability and such. My information has that we're about 8,000 pilots short of a full complement nationwide. And of course, that makes it much more difficult on the pilots themselves being asked to do even more. And it affects routes. And I would, my concerns especially of rural routes, small airports, things like that. And that just makes it that much tougher for travel. So the FAA has issued, I have here 9,500 certifications in the last couple of years, pretty good, but they didn't quite keep up with the decrease for active pilots. So it's noted today that the national airspace system has become safer over time. With improvements in safety of our airspace, I believe it's prudent to re-examine the regulations requirements for what it takes to become a pilot. That's something we can look at. Training and exam process to become a pilot in the U.S. can cost above $100,000. The FAA requires 1,500 hours of flight training, known as the 1,500-hour rule. Military pilots can do half that number, and some college graduates can have that number to reduce to 1,000 or 1,250 hours. So let me line this up for Captain Ambrosi. With improvements in the airspace system, do you believe we can be in a position to reconsider the minimum hours required for pilots, maybe especially military? Is there other requirements that can be re-examined, not to lower the level of safety or diligence, but that is reasonable within the context of what we're looking at here?
Well, thank you for your question. I can understand the plight of rural communities, but first and foremost, airlines make decisions on economics on where they allocate airplanes. It's not up to pilots, and I will tell you that in the last year, there were 10,000 airline transport pilot certificates issued, more than pilots' jobs in commercial airline, in the airline business. So we have a training backlog. COVID was obviously a major pandemic. It's great that we're all back in person here, but there's a training backlog. But there are more pilots today at major airlines than there were pre-pandemic, but they're flying less because they're all making their way through training. So we have a situation where when these pilots get back to where they belonged, they'll be more efficient and will be able to do more. But as far as rural communities, I would suggest that airlines use economics. They're flying many of those airplanes to more profitable cities now. They've upgauged over the last decade, and the smaller airplanes, when I started, were 30-passenger airplanes or smaller. Now the smallest airplane was 50, and they're getting rid of the 50-passenger airplanes for economics, not because of a lack of pilots. So
no, I wasn't saying, sir, that it's necessarily because of the pilots. It just might be an effect farther, down the chain, that might see less. My focus mostly was on would we be helping out the process if we had a harder look at the 1,500-hour rule or some other portion of the requirements that could be brought more into line with what is really needed. If you have former military, if you have others, could some of these credits, for example, is there more way to expand credits and get that number lower and still not reduce adequate training?
Well, I'll go back to we're at the safest period in aviation history right now, and a lot of that is because of these very rules. So there is a significant credit for military, half of what the requirement is. There's a significant credit, as you mentioned, for the pilots that have gone to a four-year college where they've gotten advanced academics. There's a process. The system is working. There's a process in place. If someone has an alternate suggestion, the FAA has a process. The Congress has given that to the FAA to review those and see what else is out there. However, again, I will reiterate, we're at this, this last decade is the safest in aviation history, and we should, exercise caution.
My memory correct that before it got bumped to 1,500, the number was 250? Is that correct?
I don't recall there being a specific minimum. You had to have a specific licensing, so it would have been about 250. And I can tell you from personal experience, sir, that I was a captain at a regional airline flying that 30-passenger turboprop with pilots that had 250, 500 hours as new hires, and I could qualify that as on-the-job training. And the traveling public does not deserve to have on-the-job training in an airliner, regardless of whether you're flying in and out of a large city or a rural destination.
All right, thank you. I yield back. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all of our witnesses for being here. Mr. Bolter, I'm right here for you. I wanted to also discuss the no-town